Hello, my name is Chris, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about depression, about my experiences with depression, what I've learned along my journey, and why I decided to stop taking antidepressants despite a long history of depression. Now, if the only reason that you check out my YouTube channel is for the videos on addiction and quitting smoking, then I promise you we are going to get back to those next week. Over the last couple of days, however, I have noticed that more of you have been checking out the videos that I already made about depression. And I figure around this time of year, it is a very difficult time of year for a lot of us, so it makes sense that you might be checking out those videos now. And it got me thinking that if there was ever a good or an appropriate time to make another video about depression, this is probably it. Now, those older videos that I made two very long videos last year where I basically gave you my whole life story, and I told you about every instance of depression that I've had from being age 16 up to today, which is like the better part of 20 years. Oh my goodness, that makes me feel so old. So that video is there if you want to watch it, and I won't go into too much detail. But what I will tell you is that I noticed along my journey that most of my biggest periods of depression come around the same time as the biggest periods of monumental change in my life. So for example, the first time I really experienced depression and I really experienced suicidal thoughts was when I was 16 years old and I just left school, and I'd been bullied a lot at school. I never really dealt with depression whilst I was in that environment, but as soon as I came out of school and began this transition into a new chapter in my life, I first went through this period of depression. Later I got married, we moved into a house, this was a time of big monumental change in my life, weddings and mortgages and learning to become a responsible adult, something which I still haven't figured out. But at that time I again went through a big bout of terrible depression. My ex-wife found me sat fully clothed in an empty bathtub just crying my eyes out, and she came home from work and she said, "What's wrong?" And I'm just sat there in this bathtub going, I don't know what's wrong. That was the first time I went to the doctors after that, and that was the first time that I was prescribed antidepressant medication that I would then take on and off for the rest of my life. I would go through this period of depression, they'd put me on antidepressants, things would start to get better, they'd wean me off them, then put me back on them, then they'd up the dose and down the dose and dosey dose, and here we go. And it was like that for most of the time. Things kind of hit the worst rock bottom, the absolute worst depression I'd ever had came at the start of 2017, and again I had no idea where it came from. That's how I always know when I'm dealing with depression and not just dealing with a low mood or a bad mood or being sad, because normally if I'm sad, if I'm in a bad mood, I can say, well, look, I can link it to something. I can say, okay, I'm feeling sad because, you know, a relationship just ended or somebody passed away or something like that. But when I deal with depression, it's like there is no rhyme or reason for it. It just, all of a sudden you just reach this point and it's just like I break down completely. And people say to you things like, you know, I remember going to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and talking about how low I felt, and I kept, you know, I was telling people, look, I feel suicidal right now. And this girl came up to me at the end, and she meant well, but she said, you have no reason to kill yourself, you've got everything to live for. And it's almost like saying, you know, that the reason you're depressed is because you're not grateful for what you have, or because you don't realize what you have. And that's just not true. The reason for depression is not a lack of gratitude. You know, when people say things like that, like, you shouldn't be depressed, it's like saying you have no right to feel how you're feeling. So I'm always mindful if I speak to someone who is depressed that I don't use that kind of terminology. But I sort of went off on a tangent there. Coming back to 2017, it was the start of the year, and I just hit this, I just broke for no apparent reason. And there was this tree outside my house, and every morning I would wake up. I say morning, it was around lunchtime by the time I even got the energy to open my eyes and think about getting out of bed. And I wake up and I think, is today the day that I throw a noose around my neck and go and hang myself from that tree? Every day that's how the day started for me. And I just couldn't even get the energy, because I kept thinking, if I do this, then I've got to write a suicide note, and I've got to get the rope, and I've got to, and I couldn't even get the energy to do that, and I ended up spending the entire day on the sofa, day after day, for about a month, hiding under the blanket. I just got my duvet and sat under the sofa. I put Netflix on, sat under the sofa, sat on the sofa under the blanket. I put Netflix on, and you know, I watched, like, I put like sitcoms on hoping they'd make me laugh, and they just didn't. You know, I think I watched every episode of Third Rock from the Sun, you know, with the aliens and stuff, and I haven't been able to watch that show since, because it just reminds me of this really dark time in my life. So this carried on for at least a month. It was more likely 2 months, you know, if not longer. I was on the sofa for a very long time, waking up thinking about killing myself, and then just spending all day on the sofa. I was self-employed, so I lost all my clients because I just wasn't even checking email or doing any work for them or anything like that. So all my money dried up, and I didn't know, you know, how I was even going to get myself out of this mess, and that made the depression worse. After a while, I kind of knew, like, look, I'm going to have to do something. I either kill myself now, or I get up off this sofa. And I thought, well, I've been trying, you know, I've been thinking about killing myself for so long, and I haven't done it. So let's figure out how I can get myself off this sofa. And I set myself 2 challenges that I could start working on, that wouldn't necessarily cure or heal my depression, but would just motivate me enough to get off the couch. And I figured if I could just get off the couch, then I could give life one last shot. It was like something within me was kind of ready to just go and have one last crack at this. Like, let's just go with one last push to try and get better. So I set myself these 2 challenges, and I've written about both of them, so I'll put links down in the descriptions below if you want to read more about the challenges themselves. One was, I called it the 30-day minimalism challenge, and it was basically to declutter all the crap from my flat, because I thought, I'm surrounded by all this stuff that reminds me of my past life, you know, so it's no wonder that I'm feeling so low if I'm reminded constantly of things from a life that I no longer relate to. And the other challenge was, I called it the 1,000-mile challenge. It was basically to get on my mountain bike and cycle 1,000 miles before New Year's Eve of that year. It was a challenge which was big enough to motivate me, like that I would have to get up and put some effort in, but wasn't so big that it would overwhelm me and make me think, oh my god, I can't do this, I better just go back to the sofa. Please bear in mind that I was still sick at the time. So whilst I was setting myself these challenges, whilst I was telling myself, okay, have one last go at this, I also told myself, have one last go at life, and if things don't change, if things don't improve, if you do not feel better by New Year's Eve, then you can go ahead and commit suicide. I don't feel good that I had that thought, but I had that thought. So I started the challenge, and as I've shared in so many other videos, 2017 turned out to be a tough year. People close to me passed away because I'd lost all my business clients, through my work. I had no money. I had to go and get this awful job that I just hated, just to try and string money together, whilst at the same time trying to rebuild my business. Winter came, and I could just feel things starting to slowly burn down and break. And one day in late December, the smallest thing proved to be the straw that broke the camel's back. I got stuck in traffic, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, it was just like whatever switch in my head that triggers the depression, it just went on. I was like, okay, depression is back now, hi. And just my energy completely shifted. I just broke down. And that little thought that I'd had at the start of the year of, if things don't improve, then you can kill yourself, came to me, and a little voice in my head said, well, look, things are just as shit now as they've ever been. It's nearly New Year's Eve, you might as well just kill yourself. I went home that day. I was supposed to be going to this job that I had, and I didn't turn in. I went home, and I had this really schizophrenic day of bouncing off the walls. And it was like, one minute I was like, okay, I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to sort it out. I'm going to get past this. And then in the next breath, it was like, oh my God, everything is hopeless. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might as well just die. I managed somehow to get myself to the doctor. And I don't know why, with hindsight, I don't know why I went. I think it was just a last ditch thing, because I didn't really, of all this talk of suicide and killing myself and feeling suicidal, I didn't really want to die. I didn't, people talk about that, don't they? They say suicidal people, they want to die. I never wanted to die. I just didn't know any other way to make the pain stop. I didn't know. It seemed like, for the longest time, suicide seemed like the only way to make the depression and the misery and the despair stop. And I thought, well, I'm going to go to the doctor, because maybe, just maybe, there is another way to stop it. And I went hoping and praying that they'd look at my history and say, well, this hasn't worked. We gave him antidepressants and he's still depressed. We sent him for cognitive behavioural therapy and he's still here. At one point he had person-centered therapy and he's still here. And I went, and optimistically, and all they said was, well, we can give you more antidepressants, we can up the dosage. I was so despondent and so disappointed, because I knew that antidepressants were not the answer for me. And I left the doctors and I started walking home. And that's when things changed for me. I was walking over this bridge on the way back to my house, and I got struck with this thought, and this sense of power that I'd never really had before. A thought came to me that had never really come to me before in my life, and it was, things don't have to be this way. Chris, you do not have to kill yourself. You do not have to do that in order to make the pain stop. There are other ways that we can make the pain stop. You no longer have to be depressed. It was at that point on that bridge that I realised that depression had become part of my identity without me even realising it. I had for so long let depression define who I was. Even when I was relatively okay, I was still getting this constant daily reminder and this constant daily reinforcement that you are Chris and you have depression. You are Chris and you are depressed. And I would get this reminder, this reinforcement from antidepressants, because every day I would have to take this pill, and every day this pill would remind me that you are depressed, and it will constantly be a constant reinforcement of you are depressed, you are depressed, you are depressed. So it was no wonder I started to realise, it was no wonder that I never fully got better, and I never was able to fully live without depression, because the whole damn time I was reminding myself and reinforcing this idea that depression was part of who I was. I made a decision on that bridge that I had the power to live my life free and happy without depression. That depression didn't have to define me, and it didn't have to be part of who I was. And if it wasn't going to be part of who I was, and if I was going to be free from depression, I had to break from this constant daily reinforcement that you are depressed. And that meant stopping taking the antidepressants. I also knew that if I was going to do that, if I was going to no longer take antidepressants and be free and happy and not depressed, then I had to do things very differently, because for so long I had been Chris with depression, and Chris with depression does this, goes there, sees these people. Chris with depression acts this way, eats this, goes, does all these things. If I wanted to be free and happy, I had to do everything differently from how Chris with depression did it. So I started to get more fresh air and exercise. I started to change my diet, like radically change it. I adopted a more vegetarian, vegan kind of diet. I cut sugar a lot, cut sugar right out of the picture. I let go of people, places and things that were no longer making me happy. Letting go of obligations to do things that, that just brought me no joy or satisfaction, and that in many cases made me feel worse. I stopped being the treasurer for my local Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, because the bloody job just stressed me out, and that whole entire meeting, every time I went to it, I felt worse coming out than when I went in, so I stopped going. I made lots of big positive changes, and I'm aware that I've already talked far too much in this video, so I won't talk about those changes in detail. Maybe that's one for another video if you'd like me to talk more about. But what I will say, that as a result of breaking free from antidepressants, and as a result of doing so many things differently than the way I used to do them, 2018 has been the best year that I've had in many, many years. That's not to say that it has been perfect, that I've been 100% happy 100% of the time, because that is not the case. I have had a couple of what I will call blips in my mood this year. The two biggest ones have been within the last 4 or 5 months. And again, it's to do with big radical changes, big monumental changes in my life. Around October, I just started a new college course. I went back to college in January, but the new academic year Started in September, and it was a big shift and a big change. And I went through this period of a week or two where I was just completely off and completely down, and it took a while for me to sort of reboot and dive in. And I realised now that I needed that, because it really took me out. Depression slows me down so much, and then when I eventually come back, I get more energy and more enthusiasm, and I can go back into things. The other dip has been just this past week. Again, my energy has completely shifted. My enthusiasm has completely drained, and I've just hit this period of ugh. But there are no suicidal thoughts. There are no, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, I don't even know if this is depression or not. What I do know is that whatever it is, I'm no longer fighting it. When I used to deal with depression, I used to fight it and resist, and like, I can't be depressed, I've got so much to do. Now I find that because I know that these things do, I know when people say this too shall pass, you just want to punch them. But I've learned through my experiences that these dips do pass, and that better things are on the horizon. Like I say, my depression comes around monumental changes, and I know that when the change happens, it's always positive. It's like the mind, body and soul kind of need to shut down and go into hibernation and recharge, so that the energy is there for when the big positive changes come. So I know that good things are on the horizon, and I know that whatever I'm going through now, I have to trust the process, which is easier said than done. I'm the worst person in the world at being able to simply trust the process. But I know that that's the best way for me to do it. I know that now I am shutting down, I'm slowing down, my energy is drained, my enthusiasm has drained. But I'm not sad, I'm not resisting, I'm not fighting this thing. I'm just like, do you know what, just let it play out. And when the time is right, I will once again get the energy, and I will be able to spring back up and go, hurrah! And I'll be ready for the big positive changes that are on the other side of this. If there's anything that I would like you to take away from this video today, it's that if you are going through depression, or you're just feeling low, or you're just feeling drained, it's that you are not alone. Other people are with you. I'm with you. And that magical things do happen on the other side of pain. Whatever you're going through right now, something good is coming for you. I've talked quite a lot today. I didn't plan this video out. I used to always plan the videos, but I've been encouraged to just sort of flick the camera on and talk more. So if this was all over the place, that's why. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sticking with me. As I said earlier, if you do only want the videos on quitting smoking and addiction, more of those are coming in the next couple of weeks, starting from next week. Patreon supporters can get a sneak peek of the next couple of videos in this week's exclusive bonus video for Patreon supporters. You can get that at patreon.com/Chris Scoyles, or go to chrisscoyles.com/support for other ways to support this YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've gained something from this, even if it's just past 20 minutes of your life. For more weekly videos, please do subscribe. And with that, I will say thank you for watching. I will see you next week. Goodbye.